Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Joanne McKenna. And we're going to be discussing her amazing book, Stories of Faith on the Journey to God. That's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a whole host of other places. Simply type it into a Google search bar. You're going to be greeted with all of them. And while you're at it, in addition to this amazing book, Joanne has written another book called Letters to Priests, both of which, again, through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a lot of other places. Head on over there, pick up your copies today. And before we go any further, I want to quickly take this opportunity and point out the fact that Joanne was brought to our network, People of Distinction, by one of the best publishing firms in the business. People you already know, talking about Quantum Discovery. So if you're a writer out there who has written their masterpiece and now you need help moving the book you just developed, well, look no further than Quantum, people, because this is exactly what they specialize in. You're going to want to head on over to quantumdiscovery.net and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Joanne here on the line. People, her book, Stories of Faith on the Journey to God, there's no beating around the bush. It is just that, all right? It is journal entries and little stories that are going to assist you on your spiritual journey. It is meant to inspire. It is meant to assist readers as you travel through life. And listen, we understand, man, that after a certain point, you get to an age where you realize life is filled with obstacles. It has its ups, it has its downs, and I remember when I was very young, it just always seemed to just work, right? Things just were always going right. And then I got to a point, I believe, in my teenage years where now it was like, okay, wait, no, I'm facing some adversity, and it's not just all rainbows and butterflies. But here's the great piece about that. First and foremost, I thoroughly believe that God never places anything in your path that you're not strong enough to overcome. But I also understood at a very early age, thankfully so, that life is not all about these wins and losses, right? There are, it sounds like a cliche, but I really do mean it, man. There are no losses in life because even in those moments where things look bleak, when they look very dark, although it's easier said than done, if you shift your perception, even in those quote-unquote losses, there are lessons to be learned. There are things to be gained. We grow through that adversity. So then, being a young hormonal teenager filled with all this angst, I recognized that there are wins and that there are lessons. And when you look at it from that perspective, even in those dark moments, there's a lot to be gained. And it makes it look just a little bit brighter. Now, again, I'm oversimplifying right now because an oversimplification is what's needed in the moment. But people, this book symbolizes so much, and it is going to be able to offer wisdom and so much great insight. And at the end of the day, Joanne is the expert, man. She's going to be able to articulate it all much better than I ever could. And, I'm thoroughly looking forward to this for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, she's a fellow New Englander. And as a fellow New Englander, I look forward to this discussion. Although I've been in Southern California now for almost 20 years, she's there now, and it has a special fondness in my heart. But also, Joanne is a nurse practitioner, and that is also something that hits close to home because my wife is also a nurse practitioner, and this is just going to be a great conversation. People, sit back, strap in, and get ready. Okay. Joanne, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Listen, we're looking forward to this discussion, Joanne. I love what you've done here by comprising this book because it really is going to be something that I think is an easy read, but it packs a punch and it offers so much to its readers. So thank you very much for writing it. Thank you even more for being with us to discuss it. Now, before we go into the book, start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Sure. I grew up in a close-knit Italian Catholic family in a neighborhood where my father's entire extended family of sorts, because who knows if they were really family or they were just friends, because in Italian, everybody's a paisan.
Oh, of course.
So everybody in the neighborhood was related. And adjacent to that neighborhood, there was a large neighborhood where everybody in my mother's family was related. So talking about not getting away with anything. The good news was it was so safe, and I wish I could say that about every child now.
Yeah.
It was a very safe neighborhood, but it is true. Mom and Dad knew what we were doing long before we got home that night. So anyway, from there, Little Italy was like the only thing I knew growing up. The church was there. I was very involved in the church. All my social events came out of CYO, and I was very active. I was always at the rectory in the basement helping out with mimeographing, remember that?
Yeah.
And making a dressograph plate, which obviously nobody does anymore. But there were 2,000 families, so there was a lot of work to do. So I kind of hung around there a lot. And I was very active in the CYO. I was always managing some fundraiser or a trip to Washington, because in those days a trip to Washington was big. Now they go to France. So I stayed very busy, and I almost never left the area until I graduated from high school, believe it or not. That's how contained of sorts it really was. But then I left and I got into the real world. And I left there, and of all places, I went to Boston University, which is a huge international university.
Yeah.
That was quite an awakening. And I was thrilled because I got to meet people from all over the world. And I was nothing but excited. I was an avid reader. And I just couldn't learn enough. I had a passion for learning. Actually, I still do. My grandchildren are always after me because I'm always, taking another course online or doing this or doing that. I tell them you can never stop learning. So from being around the church so much, in those days we had like 5 priests to the parish. So I got to know a lot of guys. I was in and out all the time. They got used to my being around like a fixture, and I got to know a lot of priests. So the book Letters to Priests is a collection of letters that I wrote over the years, over many years, over 30 years actually, when one of the guys were having a tough time for some reason or another. They were just letters of support and encouragement because I knew them. I knew what was in their heart. I knew how hard they worked, and it was just to lift them up a little bit. So that's how I started writing.
Love that. Well, Joanne, we know how you started. Now let's talk about this amazing book, Stories of Faith on the Journey to God. Tell us a little bit more about the book.
Stories of Faith. Every chapter begins with like a short essay of a childhood memory or a past memory. I think that our experiences and our relationships in life kind of drive what choices we make, and then those choices bring us down one road or another. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes we look back and we go, oh, I should have done this instead of that. But, whatever choice you make brings on another whole set of experiences.
Yeah.
So like you said earlier, you might say, oh, that was not the best decision in the world, but you're right. What you learn from the decision that you make is what you take to the next step, what you take to the next piece or chapter in your life, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We've all heard people say, "Oh, that was another life." Oh, no, I'm not going back there. And things like that. And instead of saying, well, it wasn't easy, but that you took something from there that is not only useful to you, but a lot of times is going to be useful for somebody else who's in the same position. And when you're in a helping profession like I am, the things that you can say to people that will help encourage them when you've been there and done that makes a big difference in how they hear you. So, I've been working I've been a nurse practitioner for 50 years, and for the last 30 years, I've been working in substance abuse and psychiatry. So I've come across a lot of hurting, traumatized people, and it's just not my job to write prescriptions. It's my job to help them take the best out of what's happening to them. So, anyway, speaking of all those priests, once they got together and they all bought me my first 4-volume breviary, and I was thrilled, and that's where I started to learn to love the Psalms. I was reading in the Office of Readings one day a homily by St. Irenaeus. And St. Irenaeus is famous for saying, the glory of God is man fully alive, or human fully alive. That line just popped off the page at me. And I thought, what does that mean? What is fully alive? How do you get there? What does it feel like? And that's it. And from that day on, I was on a mission to try to figure it out. At the same time, these 3 people from who are American, who had gone off to Burma to study for 10 years, came back to the West and started a little Buddhist monastery. Well, not so little. Holds 110 beds, so it's not that little.
Not that little.
And they did that in an old Benedictine monastery, so it still had all the stained glass windows and the altar and things like that, Mm-hmm. So I went on a retreat to a regular monastery, and the priest that was there that gave the retreat had gone on the first Buddhist retreat that in America, really, because we just didn't do that before then, and nobody knew what Eastern philosophy really meant, and it was the beginning of things. It was in the 70s, so it was very brand new, and so his retreat was a mixture of Buddhist meditation and Christian prayer. Well, there I was off and running. I ended up going to that Buddhist monastery and making many retreats for any variable lengths of time because I wanted to learn about this practice called Vipassana, which translates insight meditation. These days, we call it mindfulness. In those days, I was off my rocker, according to everybody around me. And when I tried to bring mindfulness to work in the 70s, the president of the hospital said, "You and your voodoo." But that did not stop me, I should tell you. I kept on going. I took a course from Thomas Merton, and that again urged me to continue to learn about how this East-West dialogue fit, and what did that do with Fully Alive. So that was my quest.
Love that. Joanne, listen, this is something so remarkable. People, again, you got to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pick up your copies of Stories of Faith on the Journey to God. While you're at it, make sure to look into her other book, Letters to Priests. These are books you're going to want to add to your shelves because they offer so much. You know, as a follow-up question, I love not only the title of your book, Joanne, but the cover is something. It's just, as I look at it, right, you see the trees, you see the water, the grass. There's something that is peaceful. There's something that's serene. There's something that's welcoming about it. I love to hear it from your perspective. Why did you choose that title and that cover to be the representation for your book?
Well, I think the people at Quantum wanted me to pick a monastery theme. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, that was too containing for what I was trying to say. So my husband and I had gone to Europe, and I actually took that picture from a moving bus while in Amsterdam. So
there you go.
Yeah. Why did I pick it? I picked it because one of the things I learned from Vipassana was that when you get very, very, very quiet and you start looking at the world as a creation, as something that God created, you start seeing how everything is connected. People are connected. We're connected to nature. Nature's connected to us. And so when I looked at that picture, the peacefulness about it, it's the peacefulness that I find when I have that sense of connectedness with the world. Yeah. And very quiet. And one of the stories in the book is about there's this Buddhist story about looking in the water or looking in the mirror. There's a book that says they looked in the mirror and no one was there. And when they say no one, they don't mean they're having a break in psychosis. So what they mean is that the more we discover how we see the world and how we see ourselves, the more we realize that it's not necessarily how it really is. So St. Paul, for example, he used to say a lot things like, not I, but Christ in me. And what he meant, that's what he meant by that. What he meant is I have to decrease and he has to increase. John said that when he was baptizing. So there's so many referrals in the Bible and Scripture to the self as the ego and the short-sightedness that it gives us to the world, and that the bottom line is surrendering that and letting God let you see what is true. Most of us don't want to know what's true, to be honest with you. Yeah. There's a wonderful story by Thich Nhat Hanh. It was during the Vietnam War, but I was in the Navy during the Vietnam War, as a matter of fact. And he wrote this story about how the refugees were taking boats across the water to escape, and but the Vietnamese pirates were killing them, taking their belongings, etc. And there was this 12-year-old girl that was raped by a pirate. And she was so demoralized, she jumped out of the boat and drowned herself. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about how angry he felt. And so he went off to meditate, because that's what they do, and to take a look at his own anger. And at the end of it all, what he said is I am both the refugee and the pirate. We all contain within ourselves that whole spectrum. But by the grace of God, AA says, there go I. Everyone's life experiences brings them to different places. And we can be very judgmental about people who are, mean or violent or whatever the case may be. But we have no idea what set of experiences led to their choices that led to these other experiences. Right. And really that's really how the book is set up. It's a story that leads to choices, and sometimes those choices are good, and some of the stories are wonderful, and some of the stories are devastating. I have a near-death experience. I came close to death several times, and those things that I took with me to the next step. A lot of times my patients, when they relapsed, they would be very, very depressed. And because they disappointed themselves, and they disappointed their family, and they just didn't feel like they could go on, and I'm never going to, be able to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And I always just sat down on the side of the bed, to the nurse's dismay, because it took me a long time to make rounds. Sat down on the side of the bed and talked to them about, this world is a big classroom, and there's something to be learned here. And let's talk about the relapse and what happened, and to understand a little bit more about yourself and and why you relapsed, and taking that little piece of knowledge and putting it into the mosaic of your life and moving on. Most of us don't want to, I think our biggest problem, most people's biggest problem is we don't want to let go of what's happened, and we want to anticipate the future. And we're missing right now. Yeah. Moving from one thing to another, you can't redo the past. And when you think about the past, it's never exactly the way it happened. You want to anticipate the future, but once you get there, you don't realize that that's what you were thinking of 3 weeks ago, of this event that's taking place. And it's never exactly the way you thought it was going to be. The only thing that you know is exactly what it is where you are right here and right now. And that's the beauty of mindfulness.
Joanne, as we close out of here, is there anything else you would like to tell our listening audience before we let you go?
Sometimes growing up, we're born into a Christian religion, or I happen to be Catholic, into a Catholic religion, and we're forced to go to church as kids with our parents. And then there's a period of time where we kind of disappear. And when we're in those dark periods, we don't tend to think about God. It's the last thing in our mind. We're just trying to keep our head above water. And I understand that. But what I want you to know is it doesn't matter if you call on him for help, or if you articulate any kind of feeling or don't have any feeling of love for him. It doesn't matter. He loves you. He will always love you. And he's closer to you when you are in those dark periods than you realize.
Joanne, listen, I love that advice. I love that notion, and it offers so much wisdom. People, we've barely scratched the surface. Once again, the book is called Stories of Faith on the Journey to God. Check out her other book, Letters to Priests, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other places. But I love the way she just ended by being present. by being mindful, because I can attest, and we've all fallen victim to this, right? Where we get caught up in either what has happened or what hasn't happened yet. And I'm not saying that we forget our past, and I'm not saying that we completely disregard where we're going. It is important to acknowledge those things. But it's like that old cliche, man, the present is the present because it truly is a gift. And so often we don't really allow ourselves to embrace that gift and be in the moment and be with those that are around us. This is something special, and we all have a lot on our plates right now from a number of different areas, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's the political climate, whether it's just adulting and what we have on our plates from a responsibility standpoint. That notion, I think, is so important, and it really is the perfect place to end off. You know where you gotta go. Pick up copies of these amazing books and get lost in all of it. Joanne, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you for writing these amazing books. Thank you for the wonderful words of wisdom you've been able to relay. But most importantly, thank you for being a guest here with us through People of Distinction.
You're welcome. Thank you.